Yo guys, so let's say you watch my other video, you learned about aim gods, now you want to play the game, you hop in, and there is a ton of different abilities right in front of you. Um, that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be, just a generic tier list of abilities that are in the game, so you know what you should use, what you should stay away from, at least at first, and then give you sort of a general guide for getting into the game and, getting your elo up. Because, like I said, there's no practice. Once you're playing for rank, so it's important to sort of go in knowing what abilities are good, knowing, what game plan you're going in with, what you're going to be using, and that's what I wanted to help you out with. So, I have the tiers separated S plus staple abilities, meaning you must take these. If you don't have these, you're at a serious disadvantage. Just abilities that are, they're stable, they're required. If you don't have them, you're doing something wrong. S would be easy abilities to use, plus high value whenever you use them. There's no windows where you should be using them, there's no really thinking about it, it's just when it's off cooldown, you press it and you get value. That's going to be the S abilities. Any A abilities, you do require good timing, but when you do hit the timing window properly, you'll get high value from the ability. So you do have to sort of time and think about when you're going to use it, but when you do use it, it will result in really high value. The B tier abilities are going to be hard to use, so the timing is maybe really small, or maybe there has to be a specific activation requirement for the ability, but when you do use it, you're also maybe going to get less value than an A or S tier ability. So you do want to keep that in mind. And then the C tier abilities are abilities that I think need major buffs to be used, or extremely niche picks for certain strategies, or just have low value in general. So, the first ability that I wanted to talk about is actually going to be let me see what this one is called, the Life Blossom. Now, Life Blossom, as it says in the game, is next shot landed on a teammate within 5 seconds will heal them for 30 health over 8 seconds, and it's a 10-second cooldown. So this is a heal over time ability. All of these three abilities in the first row are, we've got the Life Blossom, Greater Life Blossom, and Lesser Life Blossom. And it would just go up, so let me see here. This would be the weakest one. So this is the weakest heal over time, but it is the shortest cooldown. Medium heal over time, medium cooldown, and then biggest heal over time, longer cooldown. Now, I'm not really a big fan of these. I'm going to put these all into the B tier. They all have the same effect. You shoot your teammate and you heal them over time. The reason I'm putting them in the B tier is because some of the other heals that we'll talk about are instant heals for a lower cooldown. Now, the one that I was just talking about, for example, the medium one, this one right here, the medium Life Blossom heals for 30 health over 8 seconds as a 10-second cooldown. Another heal that we'll talk about, it's the Apollo's heal down here. It's 40 health instantly with a 12-second cooldown. So you get 10 more health for 10 more health, and it's instant 10 health just for a 2-second longer cooldown. That does seem a lot better in my opinion, but as far as the heal over times, not really a good fan, especially because it's something your teammate has to shoot onto you as well. Can't just use it on yourself, so not really a huge fan. I wouldn't consider it horrible because it's still a heal, so I'm not going to really put it in low value, but it is hard to use for less value. Sitting right there in the B tier. Now we have the bleeds. All of the bleeds, I say, are going to go to S tier. They're very meta right now. The best of the three, I think, is actually the Minor Bleed. And these are in no particular order, but just as an opinion for the bleeds, it would be the Minor Bleed. If you're interested in the ability text, the way it works is, for all of these three bleeds, it says the next shot landed on an enemy within 5 seconds after activating the bleed will deal a certain number of damage over 10 seconds. For the lesser bleed, which is this bleed on the left, the little blood stain, it is 12 damage over 6 seconds. The medium bleed, which is the blade here, it's going to be 20 damage over 8 seconds. And the large bleed is going to be 27 damage over 10 seconds. So the longer the higher the bleed, the bigger the damage is, and the longer the bleed ticks for. The cooldown also does go up. The reason bleeds have been so good is because we're sort of in a stun meta right now where People will try and stun you before you get to your pillar, and then apply bleeds to you and force you to block early. After the block goes out, they put another bleed on you, and they'll try to rush in and finish you off when you have no ice block. So, the bleeds have been very, very strong in forcing out defensives, especially getting, ice block and heals out early on. So, as soon as they're off cooldown, they're pretty much getting pressed. So that's why I'm going to put them in the S tier, easy to use and high value. Next, we've got our 2 shields, and so we've got the Shield of Absorption and the Lesser Shield of Absorption. This would be the bigger one. The bigger shield is a 31 damage absorption for 15 seconds. The lesser shield is a 18 shield health for 15 seconds, but the cooldown is less than half. The big shield is a 27 second cooldown. The smaller shield is only a 12-second cooldown. So in theory, you do get more shields out of the lesser shield, but the big shield is a beefier defensive up front if that's something you need. These are both going to go into S tier as well. Reason for that is if you just press it off cooldown, you're getting insane value. It's just a free effective HP. It's not going right into your health bar, but it's still being put on top of you of extra damage that enemies will need to get through. So I want to put it in the S tier. I've been seeing a lot of people use that at higher elo, or at 1300, 1400 elo or so. Next, we've got the Vanish of Dolos, the Invisiboy right here. Its ability is when activated, you become invisible for 7 seconds. Cooldown is 35 seconds. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the staple abilities tier. So it is one of, I think we're only gonna have a couple, maybe 3 abilities there, but I'm gonna put it in the staple ability tier because without the Vanish, you are very susceptible to being nuked after you lose your ice block or lose any sort of other defensive that you may use. The Vanish also does not break when you're shooting someone, so you can just go invisible and keep shooting them. Maybe if you're low health, your teammate doesn't have their heal, you just need something to sort of alleviate a bit of pressure. You pop your invis, and then as soon as you pop the invis, you can keep shooting them, you can heal your teammate. It also works great for collecting the crystal in the middle of the map when it spawns at 1 minute and 15 seconds to get you that damage buff, get you that damage reduction on you as well. So, due to all the multiple uses of the invisibility, and due to the reason that it doesn't break stealth while shooting, that Finalmouse, if you're watching this, you really need to nerf this ability, make it so if you shoot, it breaks stealth. But for now, it's too good of an ability not to use. And the cooldown's only 35 seconds, so really comes in handy in a lot of different ways. Gonna keep that in S+, must-take ability. The Cloak, this is a pretty popular one too, the Shadow Cloak of Erebus. I'm gonna go ahead and throw it in S tier. Reason this is so good is because it blocks all on-hit effects for 5 seconds, and it actually protects you from AoE damage. So, if anyone activates their stun or their root or pops an AoE on you, you just pop your Shadow Cloak and you walk out of it without, you're unscathed. And that's really useful for getting out of roots and stuns and dodging AoE, like I said. So the way I like to mainly use it is not really as a defensive. I sort of use it offensively. When someone has used their ice block and I push up on them with my duo, we're trying to get the kill on them, I'll usually pop Shadow Cloak right when they're getting about 40% health. So when they try and use their roots and stuns or polymorphs on me to sort of get me off of them, the cloak will stop that and just gives me that extra little bit of damage I need to get out on them before they can use some sort of CC on me. So really, really good ability. Not a must-have. There are other ways, you can get around not using this ability, but I definitely think it's an S. Almost edging on S+, but I would say right now at least, the meta of the game, I'll keep it in S. Next we have the Protection from Zeus, our orb here. Now Protection from Zeus is a shield for 6 seconds. You're immune to all abilities and damage from enemies, and you can actually continue playing, so you're not frozen or anything like Ice Block. You can keep playing. You deal 25% of your normal damage. Well, you have the shield on you, so your damage is heavily reduced. And you are able to use the shield at any time, so you can use it while stunned, you can use it well, Polymorph, the only time you cannot use it is when you're silenced. It would also remove debuffs on activation. The problem with this ability right now, it sounds great, I know, it sounds amazing. The problem with it is that it has a 50-second cooldown, so the actual effect of the ability is amazingly strong. It just has a very high cooldown, and I'm not really sure if that high cooldown is enough to warrant it over its partner Ice Block, which we'll talk about in a second here coming up next. But since the effect of the ability is so good, I'm going to put it in A tier. Just the cooldown is 50 seconds. It's a long time to wait for it to come back up, and you're only dealing 25% of your damage, so... between the two immunities, the Ice Block and the protection from Zeus, I'm going to say Zeus is going to slot into A tier, I'm going to throw Ice Block just in S tier right away before I even talk about it, but yeah, I'm going to say Ice Block is better than protection from Zeus, so... Ice Block next. It is another damage immunity, so you're frozen into an Ice Block for 6 seconds. Now, while you're frozen, you actually take no damage, but you can also not do anything, so you're just stuck there, unable to move. While you're in the block, you also are healed for 24 health. So it heals you for about a quarter of your maximum HP, and it protects you from all damage, which is really, really nice. Also, the cooldown's only 35 seconds, so you have a significantly shorter cooldown when compared to the protection from Zeus. And that's why I'm going to say it's a staple ability. It's a must-have ability, really. If you do not have Ice Block, you're going to notice people being extremely aggressive towards you. They're going to hard focus you. They're going to burst you down because they know you have nothing to protect yourself when you get low. There's no sort of oh shit button for you to push when you're getting low. I would definitely, at least for someone who's starting out, maybe if you're really advanced, 1400 plus elo, maybe you are using a triple bleed and you don't have room to take an Ice Block or something like that, you're going full aggressive. But as far as a general playstyle for starting out and learning the game, I would highly recommend keeping this as an always, in your toolkit type of ability. Definitely very important for anyone who's starting out, and just in general, competitive or even non-competitive. Next is another defensive. It's a Spartan Armor. I'm going to go ahead and throw Spartan Armor into the A tier with its recent nerfs. I'm going to go put it in the A tier because it got a cooldown increase by 10 seconds. The ability is when activated, you take 60% less damage for 8 seconds, and you can actually use it while stunned. So if you get hit with a stun right off the bat, when you're trying to walk to your pillar to LOS, this is a great ability for you to use. You just take 60% less damage. Maybe you're able to save your Ice Block because of the damage reduction from the Spartan Armor. That'll be really helpful. And the cooldown is 30 seconds now. It used to be 20. When it was 20 seconds, I would have gone ahead and thrown it maybe S, maybe even S+, but 30-second cooldown for 60% damage reduction is, you need to get the timing right. You can't just pop this off cooldown. So, leaving it in A tier, still a good defensive ability. Nothing wrong with it, but yeah. Next, we have the Ring, which is going to be, let me find the name of this, the Athena's Legendary Trinket. So, the Ring, when activated, removes every debuff currently on you, can be used at any time. Cooldown's 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the niche picks tier. Maybe it could go into the B tier, but I've only encountered a couple of teams out of dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of games at this point, where everyone has different ability combinations, and I've only seen this a couple times. I've never really seen it come in handy. The one thing I would say is it could be good for removing the silence. But the silence is also such a niche ability, this one down here, that I'm not sure it really has its place, at least in this meta right now. I would say avoid this ability until the meta develops and maybe there's more of a good use for it, but right now, as far as defensive abilities go, you're safer with some of the other options we've talked about up here already, so I'm gonna go ahead and say maybe this needs a bit of a rework or cooldown buffs. The cooldown's 30 seconds for it. just remove all your debuffs. So, yeah, not really convinced on this one yet. Could be, it's good for getting out of roots and stuns and stuff like that. Personally, I haven't used the ability that much. I've used it a couple times. I didn't get much value out of it, and I just went back to, my Spartan armor, my invisibility, my ice block, my shield, so on and so on. So it's not the best right now. I'm gonna leave it down in C tier. Next is the Athena's Dispel. Next shot landed on the teammate within 4 seconds, removes all of their debuffs. I'm gonna go ahead and throw this in the niche pick as well. If you build heavily around this, maybe your teammate takes the trinket and you take the dispel, so whenever they get rooted or whenever they get sheeped, you can dispel the sheep and then they get rooted and then they have to use the trinket on themselves. They could be an ultimate CC invincible type build, but as a generic playstyle, this ability alongside this other, the ring, is not going to get value. If you're just going into the game trying it, sort of playing a generic meta composition, unless you heavily plan your entire kit around these abilities, that's the point of the C tier. It's just you're not going to get value unless the whole comp is built around the ability. So yeah, the Dispel, it's good in cases of root stuns, stuff like that, but as far as general gameplay, you're not going to get as much mileage out of it as the other abilities available. Next we have Sheep. It's this little icon here. Sheep is the next shot land on an enemy within 4 seconds after activation will turn the enemy into a sheep for 7 seconds. Doing damage to a sheeped player takes them out of sheep. So it is a 7-second CC, essentially, if you think about it like that, because they're a sheep, they can't really do anything. And the cooldown is 35 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and throw this into the A tier. I would put it in S tier. The problem with it is that people can, they can trinket out of it. I call it the trinket. It's the Shadow Cloak. They can use the Shadow Cloak to get out of it. And on top of that, if you deal damage to someone while sheeped, it does take them out of it. So you do need to time your window properly. When you need to be using the sheep ability is after someone on the other team has used their ice block. You want to polymorph their teammate so that their teammate cannot shoot shields or heals or CCs for their other player who's used the ice block. Then when that person is polymorphed with the sheep, you just, both you and your duo, hard focus the person who's used their ice block already so they have no damage immunity. That is the way I've been using the sheep. It's been working pretty good like that, but does require good timing to get value out of it, so I'm going to leave it right up there in the A tier, even though the ability itself, the power level, might be an S tier. Just requires that good timing to get value out of it. Next is the Disarm, and the Disarm is pretty self-explanatory. Next shot landed on an enemy will disarm their gun for 4 seconds, not allowing them to shoot or use on-hit abilities. I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the B tier. The cooldown's only 25 seconds, so you think every 25 seconds someone on the enemy player can't use abilities for 4 seconds. The reason that it's only in the B tier, even though the ability sounds pretty good, is just the meta that we're in right now is a very burst stun heavy meta. So if you're getting stunned and you're getting bled, and you're rooted, you're stunned, you're bleeding, they're throwing traps on you, having a disarm is not really as good as, for example, having something like Spartan armor to defend yourself, or having the invis to get out of all the pressure, or trinketing out of a root. It's really just, the meta right now is being focused so much on burst damage. This doesn't really negate the burst. You have to wait 25 seconds to disarm someone, and then when you do disarm them, they just hide, wait 4 seconds, and come back and start bleeding you all over again. So it's not in direct opposition to the meta. This ability could improve as a new meta develops possibly, but for right now, it is harder to use for less value, so it is going to slot in right to the B tier. Now we have another heal. It's a greater self-heal. You heal yourself for 38 health. The cooldown is 30 seconds. Very long cooldown, 30 seconds for 38 health. For that reason, I'm gonna throw it into A tier. It's a big heal. It's good. All of these are a family of abilities. They're all gonna be in the A tier. They're all self heals, which makes them very, very good. If your teammate dies, you don't need to rely on them to shoot you for healing like you do with these other heals down here. And it's instantly, it's not over time, so you just instantly heal in this case for 38 health. The self-heal, the medium-sized one is 28 health self-heal, the smaller one is 12 health self-heal. I haven't been using these myself, I've been mainly using these heals down here, but if I was to use these myself, I would probably take the tiny one and just use it off cooldown for that, 12 health every 5 seconds. That would be more appropriate in my mind than having to wait 30 seconds for a big self-heal. But you don't need a partner to use them on you. That's why they're effective, and they can come in handy if you're in a 1v1. The other person maybe has these heal over times only that you need a partner for, and you've got these self-heals. That's pretty much a guaranteed win. You just play attrition and LOS the pillars and heal up. That's a guaranteed win for you, so I like the heals. Gonna put them in A tier. I just don't think they're as strong as some of the other heals we're gonna talk about later on. Next we have Greater Self Rejuvenation. These are more heal over time, similar to the other heal over times we talked about, but they're self heal over times. I want to put them in B tier as well, just because I truly think that heal over time right now is not as strong as the instant heals. I think the instant heals maybe need a bit longer cooldown, or even the heal over times need a shorter cooldown to be more effective. So I want to throw them along with the other heal over times in the B tier. Not bad, but just, not great. Not as good as the instant heals. Next we have the Slow. Slow is going to be in the niche tier. What it is next shot landed on an enemy within 5 seconds after activation. Will slow their movement speed by 50% for 7 seconds. The reason this is just a low value pick is because the movement speed in this game is already so low that there's no reason you need to slow it even more. The ability right now is just not worth taking with the base movement speed of the game. It does need, I think, to be changed or reworked in some way for anyone to take it. I've not encountered a single player using this ability, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw it in the low value tier. It's just not worth taking at the moment. Next we have Hector's Roar. So when activated, every enemy within 4 meters will have their movement speed decreased by 50%. It's an AoE slow, so still just, in my mind, useless, not that great, no real value coming out of it. Throwing it with its single target slow buddy here, just down in the C tier. Next we have the Zeus's Storm, these ice shards here. So the next shot landed on the ground, so this is not an on-hit player ability, it's an on-hit ground ability, so you actually have to shoot the ground for it to work, but the next shot landed on the ground within 5 seconds after activation. Will spawn a blizzard on the ground for 10 seconds. That will slow down enemies by 50% and deal 5 AoE damage per second inside of the AoE radius. So it's a 10-second long AoE that is at 50% slow and ticking damage for a 30-second cooldown. This is a very strong ability. I'm going to go ahead and throw it up in the S tier. What this ability is great at is forcing people away from their pillars so that you can hit bleeds and roots on them. So the game starts, people go to their pillars, you pop your Zeus's Storm on the enemy pillar, they're forced to back up a little bit, giving you line of sight on them to shoot them. You apply your bleeds on them, you hit stuns on them, and then they just have to block. It's almost a guaranteed way to force out Ice Block. I've been seeing this ability being used a lot for that purpose, and it's really, really good at what it does. On top of forcing people into LOS, what you can use it for is after someone ice blocks, you can put the storm under them so that it's just more pressure applied to them with the ticking AoE damage. And on top of that, they're slowed, so they have to, it's easier to hit them when they have no block for the kill, and they have to slowly walk themselves out of it unless they're using a blink. Or they can shroud themselves out of the AoE like we talked about earlier. You're immune to AoE damage and blocks on hit effects, so very strong ability right now with Zeus Storm going up in the S tier. Next is another AoE, Hades Plague. I'm gonna put the Plague in the A tier just because I feel like this is just a worse Zeus's Storm at the moment. The AoE lasts for only 8 seconds instead of 10 seconds. The ticking damage is more ticking damage than the Zeus's Storm, but you don't have the slow aspect. So this is a pure damage ability, where this is a CC and a damage ability that lasts longer. And the cooldown for these abilities are both the same 30 seconds, so I really think this is just a worse form of the Zeus's Storm ability right now, and I wouldn't really recommend taking it, even though it's still a good ability. If you're going to take one of the two, you always want to take Zeus's Storm, in my opinion, right now. Next, we have Hephaestus Explosion. It is this cannon ability, and I'm thinking where I want to put it here. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Now, not a lot of people have been using this ability, so this might be surprising if you played the game on your own. But the reason I'm gonna put it in A tier here is because of the niche uses that it has. Now, what the ability does is the next shot landed on the ground within 5 seconds after activation will cause an explosion that deals 17 damage and knock players back if they are in the AoE radius. And it's only a 20-second cooldown, so it's 17 damage burst, and the enemies get knocked up into the air, they go flying, and that has a lot of different uses, right? So for example, let's say the enemy team's running to the middle for the crystal. You can use the explosion to knock them back from the crystal and give you a chance at running for it. Another good use for it is if someone's hiding behind a pillar trying to LOS you after they've used their block and you're going in for the kill. You can use the explosion to bounce them out of their pillar and they're flung into the open. Makes for a really easy kill. Also, just the 17 damage burst, that's a lot of burst damage. I think that's the most burst in the game out of any ability, so having 17 damage just shoot out instantly can apply a lot of pressure to someone. So it does require good timing, all those situations are pretty unique, so you're gonna have to really think about when you're using the ability, but when you do use it in the proper window, you're getting high value, so slotting right into the A tier for this one. Next we have a Fear. These are two different, both of the eyes are fears. First one is Fear of the Underworld, so next shot landed on an enemy within 4 seconds will cause the enemy to lose control, so you actually lose control of your mouse and keyboard, and you will start to run in a random direction for 5 seconds. If you take more than 20 damage while feared though, that fear will break before the 5 seconds expires, so they cannot hard focus you in this. If they do, the fear will just break and it's a useless ability. I'm going to go ahead and throw both of the fears and the B tier. This other blue fear here is an AoE fear. It just when activated, any enemy within 4 seconds will be any enemy within 4 meters will be feared for 10 seconds. So it's good for AoE. If both of the enemies are stacked up, you can use it and sort of alleviate some pressure, but the windows for these fears, and the fact that if you do a lot of damage you break them, they're not as good as the CCs where the enemy's just stuck in place and you can wail on them with headshots. So I'm just going to say that they're harder to use and you don't get as much value, so I'm going to throw them down in the B tier. Haven't seen a lot of people use these abilities, so right now they're going to sit near the bottom of the list. Next is Countershot. So within 3 seconds of activating the ability, your next shot landed on an enemy that has an on-hit ability activated will counter the enemy's shot, silencing them for 7 seconds. Now, and this other skull here is Counter Headshot, which is the same ability. If you activate the ability and shoot them, they get silenced for 14 seconds. So it's twice as long, but this one has to be a headshot, or this one you can shoot them anywhere, in the foot, in the chest, so on. Now, silence is an insanely strong debuff in this game, because when you're silenced, you cannot do anything. You cannot ice block, you cannot invis, you just have no abilities. You're completely silenced. Now, 7-second silence is already long, but a 14-second silence is insanely long for not being able to use any of your 7 abilities. I'm gonna go ahead and, these are really hard abilities to use, so I'm gonna put them in B tier for now. But if maybe, because the cooldown on, or sorry, the activation time on these is only 3 seconds, so you have to hit a shot within 3 seconds, and the enemy needs to have an on-hit ability equipped. So you actually need to hit the enemy when they have another ability active, like for example, they have a bleed active where if they shoot you, it bleeds you, or if they have the fear active where if they shoot you, it fears you. You need to activate your ability while their ability is active, and then shoot them while their ability is still active before it goes off on you to get the silence. So there's a lot of setup required, but if you do silence someone, it's an instant win. You just win the game right away. Whenever I've been running this ability and had this ability run against me, as soon as someone on my team or someone on their team is silenced, the game is over. There's just no coming back from a silence. It's just so strong at this point, so it's extremely difficult to get the silence off. There's a lot of setup required, so I'm going to put it in the B tier, but the actual, effect of the abilities like S+++, just instant win button if you can get it off. So I'd like to maybe see some builds centered around these abilities specifically, somehow, if there's any way you can do that. I haven't thought about it myself, but the ability is so strong, it just requires a lot of setup, so I'm going to leave it down in B tier. Next is the Blink of the Magi. So on activation, you teleport 13 meters forward, and you can also use Blink while stunned, removing the stun and teleporting you at the same time. The only time you cannot use the Blink is while you're rooted. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It's usable while stunned, but not while rooted. And then you also gain 30% extra headshot damage for 4 seconds after using your Blink. The Blink, I'm going to say, is going to go into the A tier. I haven't seen a lot of people using it, which kind of surprises me. I feel like this ability is really, really strong for getting out of the stun meta that we're sort of experiencing right now, but yeah, it's just a very good ability. You get 30% headshot damage. The cooldown's only 14 seconds long on a Blink that teleports you a good, 13-meter distance. It's helps you get out of CC, so just all around a very strong ability. I'd like to see more people use this. I think it's very strong. Yeah, I'm gonna throw it up right in the A tier. Next is Roots from the Underworld. This is just instant S tier ability, but we'll talk about it. Roots from the Underworld is next shot landed on an enemy within 4 seconds after activation will root them in place for 2.5 seconds. And the cooldown is 35 seconds. So the reason this is so strong is because the meta we're in now, like I said, is this, stun, bleed sort of meta. And what we see is, you get rooted, and they apply the stuns to you, and then after the root's about to end, you get, you get rooted, then they apply the bleeds to you. And when the root's about to end, you get stunned. On the stun's about to end, you get trapped, and the whole time you're just getting wailed, headshot after headshot after headshot with all these bleeds ticking on you, so this is just a part of that meta right now. It's just so easy. You use this off cooldown, you root someone, they're stuck in place, they're forced to pop defensives because they're taking so much damage. They've got to use their Spartan armor to take 60% less, and they've got to use their greater self-heal or ask their teammate for some of these heals down here, so really been impressed with how strong this ability is, so yeah, I'm just going up in the S tier. Next is going to be Headhunter, these 3 skulls. So when activated, your headshot damage is increased by 45% for 4 seconds. So as many shots as you can get out in those 4 seconds, your headshots are doing 45% more damage. I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the B tier here. Now, the value is great. It's not the lower value the reason it's going in the B tier. It's just harder to use because you need to be hitting all headshots to get value out of this ability. And if you click this ability and don't hit headshots, you're wasting one of your ability slots, right? So this can only be used in conjunction with other abilities where you're going to land all headshots in those 4 seconds to get the maximum amount of damage out of it. So you need to be landing your roots, you need to be landing some of these stuns. You need to be sure you're getting full value out of the ability, so it is very difficult to use. So I'm going to throw it down in the B tier for right now. Next is Achilles Snipe. The next headshot landed on an enemy within 3 seconds after activation will deal 250% headshot damage. So you're dealing triple headshot damage and then some, so about 25 damage, I think. This is just 25 damage headshot burst. It lasts for 3 seconds, and the cooldown is 8 seconds, so you have this every 8 seconds, and then you have 3 seconds to land your shot. I'm also going to throw this into the B tier, because it's the same as this Headhunter one. You know, you need to make sure you're going to land that shot. The cooldown's only 8 seconds though, so in theory you could sort of spam the ability, but you do also, it only makes sense to use it in a kill window when you need the burst. It's not something good to just be using randomly, so going down on the B tier as well. Not super impressed with the ability, but the low cooldown does make it more viable, I would say, than the Headhunter similar option. Next is Athenian Double Strike. So when activated, 60% of the damage done to an enemy is reflected to their teammate. Lasts 7 seconds. This is going to be a niche pick ability. I haven't really been seeing anyone run this ability. What this does is, like I was saying before, 60% of the damage you shoot onto someone is sent over to their teammate instead. So it's sort of like you're doing chunks of damage to someone else, but you're really trying to shoot the person you're shooting at, and it can just be a little bit confusing. You would need a specific build around this ability for this one to make sense. It is going to go down into C tier, it's a low value ability. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for me to see anyone use this at the moment. Next is Hades' Gift. So when activated, the next shot you get hit by roots that enemy that shot you for 4 seconds. I'm going to put this in B tier as well. The reason I'm putting this in B tier is even though it is a root, you need the enemy to make a mistake for it to go off. Whereas with this root up here, that's an S tier, you can just shoot them yourself to root them. Here, the root only applies if they shoot you while this ability is active. So if I see this on top of another player, I'm never going to hit them, because I know if I do, I'm going to get rooted, and I'm just making myself an easier target. This is very avoidable, and for that reason I'm just going to put it down in B tier. Even though the root is nice, the enemy has to make a mistake for the ability to gain any value at all, so I would stay away from that one. It's the same thing with Athena's Gift. It's a stun. This is a stun, but the only way the stun goes off is that the enemy has to shoot you while this is active. So you pop the ability, you have an icon that pops up over your head, and then if the enemy shoots you while the icon's over your own head, they get stunned. Same reason for the root, it's just, you know, why would you use this when this stun down here is something you have complete control over yourself? You can stun the enemy whenever you want. So, throwing down in the B tier, just a harder to use ability. You really need the enemy to make a mistake to gain value. Next is Siren's Song. When activated, you reflect 80% of incoming damage back to the enemy for 5 seconds. I'm going to put this down in B tier as well. I haven't really been seeing many people with this. I've seen some melee builds incorporate this. I myself have tried a melee build with this ability. It did work out pretty well. It actually can be used as sort of a niche counter to the stuns and bleeds, so if they apply all these bleeds to you and you're rooted and you're just ticking and ticking and ticking with bleeds, you activate your Siren Song and then suddenly the enemy is taking 80% of that damage back to them, so it can be a pretty hilarious, honestly, niche ability to see enemies chunk themselves so hard, but as far as, you know, you really need to time when you're activating it to get value, and you really need to be paying attention to what cooldowns the enemy has, so it's a much higher level ability in that sense. I want to throw it down in the B tier due to just difficulty of use to get full value out of the ability. Next, the shield here is going to be Armor Break. The next shot landed on an enemy within 5 seconds will break their armor, causing them to take 20% more damage for 9 seconds from you and your teammate. Now the cooldown on this is only 10 seconds, so I am going to throw it in the A tier. 20% damage buff for, and it lasts 9 seconds. The cooldown's only 10 seconds, so you can really cast this very frequently. You're going to be doing 20% more damage. So you're getting 1 extra damage from a body shot, and I think 2 extra damage from a headshot. That can make the difference. With the body shot being, I believe it's 5 damage, maybe it's 4 damage. and the headshot being 7 damage. You should get 2 extra from the headshot, 1 extra from the body shot, so being able to just do a little bit more damage can be the difference between bursting someone down before their block comes off cooldown, or them getting away. So I really like this ability. I'm surprised more people aren't using it. I use it for myself, and the damage change is significant, especially when you stack it with bleeds and headshot multipliers and these niche builds like that. So you can combine abilities with the armor break to make it more effective. That's what I would recommend. Bursty armor break builds are really fun to run, so I definitely recommend trying this ability. Maybe not as your very first build, but as something to go in with, thinking if you want to really just burst someone down 100 to 0 as fast as you can. Maybe stack Headhunter, stack Achilles Snipe, bring a couple of roots to lock them in place, hit them with a headshot, and just watch their health go down 40, 50 health in one shot. It's really, really funny, so good ability. Surprised more people aren't using it. Next is Hades' Cursed Strike. Your next shot landed on an enemy within 5 seconds after activation does 50% more damage and decreases their incoming healing by 60%. So the Cursed Strike is I'm going to put it in the B tier. This is an ability that I would stack with Armor Break and Achilles Snipe and Headshot Hunter, or Headhunter, and those other types of abilities. The anti-heal aspect is not what I would pay attention to. It's that the one shot does 50% more damage. So you deal 50% more damage on top of 250% more damage, on top of 45% more headshot damage, on top of 20% damage buff. That adds up really quickly. It is harder to use because your whole build has to be centered around landing those shots, but when you do land that one shot that is 350, 400% damage buff on it, it's going to chunk the enemy for significant damage, 40 plus damage if it's a headshot in a single shot. So yeah, definitely an interesting ability. The anti-heal aspect where they take, 60% reduced healing for 8 seconds. Sort of a non-factor because so many defensives, the invisibility, that doesn't matter, the ice block, that doesn't matter. So the main aspect of the ability that I would really pay attention to is the 50% damage buff for that one shot, and you want to stack that with other damage amplifiers. So interesting ability, just not really finding its place with the meta right now. I would like to try some builds with it though, with lots of stacks. Next is Ares' Devastating Strike. Next shot landed on an enemy within 4 seconds does 90% more damage. Another ability, like I said, you just have to stack it with other abilities of the same family to get full value out of this. So you can't just throw it in. Anything up here, you can just throw the ability in and you get instant value. But down here, you really have to plan your build around stuff like these abilities. So yeah, throwing it in with the other damage stacking abilities, it's the same. This other ability here, Achilles' Sinister Strike. Next shot landed on an enemy within 4 seconds does 50% more damage and applies 5 damage over 3 seconds, so it has a very small bleed. Not enough to be as good as these bleeds up here, so gonna throw it down. These other damage buffing abilities, same thing as I've been talking about for the last few minutes here, just not good on its own. You really have to plan around it for it to be useful. Next one, the Time Turner. When activated, all your ability cooldowns are reset. You will sacrifice 25 health, and for 15 seconds you deal 50% less damage and take 50% more damage, 70-second cooldown. Yeah, the cooldown is just too long on this. I think the cooldown could be halved, and this ability still wouldn't really see use. You take more damage, you deal less damage, just to have all your cooldowns back up. Yeah, it's just really hard to see this being very useful. One way I would think about it is if you had a full kit of extremely defensive cooldowns that are for your teammate, and then your teammate is just full aggression. So maybe your teammate doesn't run Invis or Ice Block, but he has triple bleeds, he's got stuns, he's got traps, he's got roots, just full on aggression. But he has nothing for himself, and then you yourself, you can load up on, maybe you take all these heal over times, and you've got double shield for your teammate, and you've got maybe more heals down here, and you can cleanse his debuffs with Athena's Dispel, and the fight's going on and your teammate needs to get, healed, but you've already used everything, you pop your time turner, get all your heals back, and then, it doesn't matter that you're doing less damage if you're mainly just acting as a support player in the game. In 2 versus 2, I don't see this being used. If 3 versus 3 comes out in this game, and there can be a dedicated sort of support player, then I think this would start to see play with supporting abilities, but right now it just doesn't have a place, I feel like, so yeah, gonna put in the low value tier. Next is Achilles Bladestorm. I'm gonna put this in the B tier. I think, actually, I'm gonna throw this up in the A tier now, and it kind of might be surprising, but this ability works very well with stuns and roots. So even though it's not a bleed, it does tick for 8 damage every second. The way the ability works is when activated, you summon a storm of blades around you. Any enemy within 5 meters of you takes 8 damage every second for 5 seconds. So maximum of 40 damage. Cooldown is 8 seconds. After someone ice blocks, if you can get up in their face, hit them with a root so they can't move, and then pop the blades on them while just shooting them in the head over and over again, you're doing, I believe the gun shoots twice in a second, so it's 15 plus 8 damage a second, doing 23 DPS, 23 damage per second, and yeah, you can 100 to 0 someone in 4 seconds like that. You're doing 23 times 4 plus your buddy throwing in a few shots. That's someone dead in 4 seconds or less. So really nice burst from this. You do need that good timing, like with these A tier abilities. You do need to time this properly. Obviously, you can only use this when you're in melee range of someone, and then when you are in melee range, you need to make sure that you keep them within melee range the entire duration of the ability, that whole 5 seconds. So have not been seeing almost anyone use this ability. But me and my duo, we primarily run this melee build that centers all around this ability, which maybe is why I think it's maybe better than it is in reality, but I like this ability. I think it's really fun to use, especially when people are so focused on shooting long range bleeds and everything. When you get up in their face with the Blade Storm, it's pretty hilarious, so really fun ability right now. I like it a lot. I'm going to put it in the A tier just because it synergizes well with roots and stuns when you get up close to them. Next, we have 3 more healing abilities. The heals, I'm actually going to throw these heals into the S tier. All 3 of these heals. It's going to be Apollo's Greater Heal is this big one. The medium one is just Apollo's Heal. And then the hand here at the end is Apollo's Lesser Heal. The way these abilities work is after activation for 5 seconds, the next shot you shoot at your teammate heals them for a certain amount of health. The tiny heal is 17 health, the medium heal is 40 health, and the big heal is 60 health. The 60 health heal has a 22-second cooldown. The 40 health heal has a 12-second cooldown. And the lesser heal has a 3-second cooldown. So every 3 seconds you can heal someone for 17 health. That is wildly good. In fact, I'm gonna move the bigger heal down here. These 2 heals are what I'm really gonna focus on. I think honestly, these heals need a cooldown reduction. Now, the 40 heal being 12-second cooldown, the lesser heal 17 HP being only on a 3-second cooldown. That needs to go up, even by a couple seconds. Maybe if it was 6-second cooldown or 5-second cooldown for this, and then 14-second, 15-second cooldown for this one. Being able to pump out that much instant healing so frequently makes these just invaluable heals. I think the best heals that you can get right now in the game, which is why I put them above the other heals we've talked about. The larger heal, it's a 22-second cooldown for 60 health. The problem I have with this heal is a lot of the time you're not healing for huge chunks. You want to heal for, 40 HP, 20 HP or so, right around where these 2 abilities are sitting, so you're going to do a lot of over-healing with this ability, and the cooldown is just longer, so you don't have it active as much. Your effective healing is lower over time, so this one is not quite as good as its 2, brothers in the same family, but Yeah, these two are really, really good heals. These are the heals you're going to want to be taking into your games, at least right now with the way the cooldowns are just so low. I mean, 3-second cooldown for this one. Um, yeah, that's ridiculous. 17 health every 3 seconds is really, really strong. Next, we have Rage of Achilles. This one's very simple, so whenever you activate it, you deal 40% more damage for 10 seconds. Again, damage stacking ability going with the other damage stacking abilities. This one is a bit easier to use, you know, it's just 10 seconds of a flat damage buff for 40%. That one's real nice, but I would say it's better than some of these other ones we've talked about, but not good enough to really move it into that A tier. Requires a lot of setup for you to get the kill window with this, so it's in B tier with its other family. Next is Titan's Fury. So when activated, you sacrifice 25 health and your damage is increased by 60% for 8 seconds. You do not, you're unable to use the ability if you don't have the 25 health to sacrifice. Now, I want to put this down in B tier as well. I almost thought about putting it in C tier just because the difference between these two abilities is that you sacrifice 25 health. You think 25 health is 4 headshots. Almost just under 4 headshots worth of damage to use this ability on you. And it's only a 60% buff, whereas this one is a 40% buff that actually lasts longer than this ability. So if you're going to take one of these two, I would almost always take the Rage of Achilles instead of Titan's Fury. This axe being Rage of Achilles, so yeah, I just don't think it's worth the health sacrifice. Maybe if it was 80% damage buff or 85%, 90%, you know, then it would be worth sacrificing the health. But yeah, I just don't really see this having a place other than in a comp where you're specifically stacking damage abilities with, you know, the headshot and so on and so on. Next is Charge of Leonidas. I'm actually going to throw this up as an S tier ability, and now if you played the game you might think that's a little bit weird, but the reason it's an S tier ability is because of the multiple different uses this ability has. It's a defensive ability, it's an offensive ability, it's a movement ability. You know, it checks so many boxes for you. As to what the ability does, it says the next shot landed on an enemy within 3 seconds after activation will stun the enemy for 12 seconds and you will charge to the enemy. Stun the enemy for 1.2 seconds, not 12. I was reading that so fast. Stuns the enemy for 1.2 seconds and you charge to the enemy. Cooldown is 20 seconds. So, you stun them. It is a brief stun, only a 1.2 second stun, so it doesn't last that long. But the big thing is that you charge to where the enemy is. So, this can be used in so many different ways. Just a few that I've been using it myself as. If the enemies are going for the crystal and you're behind the enemies, you know, you're on the back foot, you're not going to make it. You pop your Charge of Leonidas, you go straight to the enemy, they're stunned, and then while they're stunned, you use that time to leapfrog past them and grab the buff from them. So when you grab the buff from them, you know, it's the crystal in the middle, it's that 50% damage buff and 50% damage reduction to you. That's so important. And if you're on the back foot, you're in your spawn, you're getting pelted, you just really can't peek. They start moving in for the crystal. You activate your Charge of Leonidas, you slingshot right to the crystal, you grab it, the enemy's stunned, you use your invis to back out, and then you're in such a good spot after that point. Such a good spot. The other way it's good, maybe the enemies are on your teammate, you're at a faraway pillar, they're both 2v1ing your teammate, he really needs help. There's no way for you to get over to him. You just pop your Charge of Leonidas and you go right in. Then it becomes a 2v2. They have another body to look at. It's a lot more distracting for them to try and focus down one person. Throws yourself into the mix, gives you a really good way to distract the enemies and just sort of make some more noise for them to distract them. On top of that, it's also just a base stun. You know, on top of being a movement ability and a utility ability, it is a stun. It is a CC ability too. So if you really need to just stun someone down, and, you know, not let them use an ability when they get to 20%, 30% without no ice block, you pop the stun on them just for that, you know, those 2 or 3 headshots you get while they're stunned, to really just finish them off and, you know, get the kill. So I'm shocked, honestly, that more people haven't been using this ability, maybe because they think it's only for melee builds in combination with the Blade Storm down here, but this ability is just so good at so many things. It's a CC, it's a movement ability, you can use it to slingshot to the orb as a utility ability, you can help your teammate as a defensive ability, you help if he's getting 2v1'd across the map, you know, you use slingshot over there. It's just so strong. One of the most, if not the most underrated ability in the game, I believe, right now. Haven't been seeing a lot of people use it. I always take it in every one of my builds. I've been taking this ability, so really, really impressed with it. Next is going to be the Trojan stun. I'm going to throw the stun. I'm debating between S plus and S, but yeah, I think I'm going to put it in S. The reason I don't put it in S plus is just because it's not a must-have ability. You don't need this ability to win the game. So you basically need these two abilities to win, unless your build is heavily specific and focused around some, you know, some aspect that you've decided you want to really try, some type of build, for example, the damage builds we talked about, but yeah, I'm going to throw it in S, just barely not S+. The reason I do that is because the ability, Trojan Stun, the next shot landed on an enemy within 4 seconds, will stun that enemy for 2.2 seconds. Stuns are better than roots because while rooted, you know, the enemy can still shoot their gun, there's still some abilities that they have access to, but when stunned, they really just have to sit there, and they're unable to do anything, you know, other than ice block if they really have to, so this is the ability you use when you're trying to finish off an enemy. It's also something you can use right out of the gate when they're trying to get to their pillar and LOS you. Use the stun on them before they get to their pillar, and then you're just drilling headshots into them. Maybe you force out an ice block early, so really, really, really strong ability. I use it in almost all of my kits. Just barely not S+. Highly recommend using the stun in your kit. Next, we have the trap that recently got nerfed, Artemis's Trap. So the next shot landed on the ground will spawn a trap that is invisible to enemies. If an enemy steps on it, they will be trapped. It stuns them for 2 seconds. It deals 10 damage and an additional 12 damage over 5 seconds. You can only place a maximum of 3 traps, and the cooldown's 20 seconds. This did just get nerfed. I'm going to still throw it in S tier. Before it got nerfed, I would have put it in S+, but at this point it's an S tier ability, very, very strong. They are invisible to the enemies the traps are, so when you put them down, the enemies cannot see them. You want to put them down at the pillar, so they walk into the traps, and then they take the initial 10 damage, they tick for the 12 damage, and it acts as a 2-second stun. So it really is a ton of CC, it's a huge CC ability. The only difficult part about it is you have to get them to walk into it. So the only place the traps are really going to get value is at the pillars. Even with that being the case, it's so strong that if someone walks into a trap, it's almost like, I'm not going to say it's a guaranteed win because that's just not true, but similar to how it would be with a silence, but with the trap, it is very, very strong due to the CC chain and how that works in this game. So what you can do is you can root someone, they're rooted for 2.5 seconds, then after the root's about to end, you hit them with your stun, so they're stunned again and placed for 2.2 seconds, and then right before the stun ends, you can throw a trap at their feet, which stuns them for 2.5 seconds and has initial damage and is a damage over time, and the trap won't apply to the enemy until the stun ends. So you can chain your CCs to do enormous amounts of damage, force an almost guaranteed ice block out of the enemy, and then you're in a really good position right off the bat of a combat, or just in the middle if you land the root in the middle of the arena as well. So really, really strong ability. Was S+ up until they nerfed it. Now I say it's a strong S tier ability. It's not a must-have, but good in any kit. Next, we have Olympian Sprint. Olympian Sprint is when activated, your movement speed is increased by 100% for 7 seconds, and it breaks you out of root. Even though this breaks you out of root, it's just not strong enough for me to say that you should really be taking it right now. Meta is more focused on stuns than roots, even though roots are extremely strong. The movement speed bonus you get from this is it's good as a defensive, but it's not as good as, you know, having resistance to AoE and on-hit effects, or not as good as going invisible, not as good as being damage immune. So as an overall ability, I think it's just very weak right now. Maybe if they reduce the cooldown from 25 seconds to 15 seconds, it would see more use, I think. Also, maybe if they just added, you know, on hit slow as well, so you move fast and they move slower. I'm not sure what they could do to make this ability more usable, but for right now, it's not strong enough to really warrant adding to your kit, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw it. Yeah, I'm actually just gonna go ahead and throw it in the niche pick tier. It's just so... there's not a lot of builds you can really use this ability around. I'm just gonna, yeah, go ahead and say avoid it for now. Next is, and the last one actually, is Heal God. So this ability saw some use during the tournament, since the game released, I haven't been seeing a lot of people use this ability. Its effect is when activated, all your shots landed on a teammate heals them for 7 health per shot, lasts 6 seconds. So for those 6 seconds, any shot that you land into your teammate heals them for 7 HP, just as many shots as you can hit. This is the probably highest effective heal in the game, besides the Apollo's Greater Heal. The problem that I have with this ability, for one, is that you actually, you know, have to be hitting constant shots on your teammate other than just one shot. If you're missing shots, maybe you only heal 14 health, you know, 2 times 7, you hit 2 shots, you only heal them for 14. So if you're missing shots, you're missing value on the ability, and the cooldown is 14 seconds long, whereas the cooldown for this heal here, the Apollo's heal, it's a 40 HP heal with only a 12-second cooldown, and you only have to hit 1 shot. So if you start looking at the math and how likely you are to hit the shots and how often you have the ability come up, it makes a lot more sense to use something like Apollo's heal or Apollo's lesser heal for the higher effective HP than it would be to go for Heal God. So it's not as bad as the heal over time abilities, I think, so I'm going to slot it into the A tier. It's just, if you're going to go for a heal, I would recommend these heals up here as your first option, and then if you already have those, maybe you start looking into these other abilities as your sort of secondary options. But yeah, that's gonna about do it for the tier list. These are in no particular order, by the way, so just because, for example, invisibility is to the left of Ice Block doesn't mean it's the best in the game or anything like that. It's just, these are where they're all gonna slot into. I might make more Aim Gods videos. I know I'm really enjoying the game myself, so I'm just trying to help everyone else sort of get into it. I really want the community to grow, I really want the game to do well, because I've just had so much fun playing it, so anything that I can do to help that is sort of what I'm trying to do right now. But if you watched the video, I hope you liked the video. Hopefully I can be making more videos soon, and yeah, so hopefully it helps you in the game. Talk to you later, guys.